Hi, my name is Brad Skiff, and I've been an editorial cartoonist for the last 19 years, and I've drawn for the OMAC Okanagan County Chronicle since 2010. I've entitled this video How Cartoonists Think, but that's a bit presumptuous of me as cartoonists are as varied as their work. The key word here is think. Most folks assume cartoonists are oddballs who sit on the fringes of society and crank out humorous sketches, and that perception isn't off by much. But to get really good at their craft, cartoonists must think, must distill psychology, history, political views, and cultural insights into one effective image. Take this cartoon, for example. Instead of simply showing you how I drew it, I want to deconstruct my thought processes to help you see the decisions cartoonists must make while employing their craft. Drawing is a skill that requires a lot of practice, and the ideas I come up with are often the product of exploration. In this cartoon, I'm drawing the key figure first, but I didn't start with this version. In fact, my first idea was quite different. I wanted to portray the difficulties of students adjusting to virtual courses, and so the metaphor of a rickety old rope bridge came to mind, and that brings up an important point. I often try to create visual metaphors to communicate my ideas. In this version, there is certainly an air of danger, but notice how small the character is. How can we tell if this is a child? How can the viewer relate to the plight of the subject? In this next version, the characters are much closer, and we can see the fear on their faces. Also, I'm having fun with the notion of learning about imaginary numbers in a virtual setting. Still, putting kids on the bridge would make their frustrations and fears even more relatable to the viewer. Now the kids are clearly in real trouble. I like the composition in that I'm using the empty space below to emphasize the subjects and to increase the psychological tension. Still, the figures are too stiff and the cartoon seems too wordy. That's when I realized the message I'm trying to communicate is really about kids slipping between the cracks, a phrase to describe students who fall behind in their studies, which is what the girl is complaining about. That brings up another point. Cartooning is a fluid process, and your initial idea may not be in your final product. As I draw the bridge, I want to provide subtle psychological clues to help communicate its structural weakness. I make the boards thin and warped. I draw rough edges to indicate the plank could snap at any moment. For the same reason, I draw the ropes thin, not thick. I always tell my students that text is part of the art. We don't write words, we draw them, and that's frustrating for beginning cartoonists. They might work really hard on a drawing and then scribble in the captions or speech bubbles as if they were an afterthought. Not only must text be carefully applied, but the artist has to plan where to place it in the composition. And of course, always proofread your work. Since the use of empty space is so critical in this cartoon, I'm going to shade only part of the far cliff, and I will fade it out as if the canyon below is full of fog. The shading in the background will also help visually balance the larger forms and text in the foreground, making for a more appealing composition. To ink the cartoon, I use simple markers. I have some technical pens which are more permanent, but since the artwork is going to be digitized and not displayed, I'm not so worried about permanence. There are so many ways to ink a cartoon, and really the artist's personal choice comes into play here. I prefer sketchy lines over solid, bold outlines, and for me that lends visual interest to the characters. My personal influences include Jeff McNelly and David Horsey. Choosing a style for my signature took time. It seems a bit vain to practice writing your name over and over in different ways, but really your signature is much like a logo that introduces you to the world. Over the years, I've used 3 different stylized versions, but this is the one I favor now. The final artwork is colorized on the computer, then sent to my editor via email. In this final version, the key character is emphasized using space. We can clearly identify with his fear of slipping through the cracks, and the message is clear. Virtual learning has inherent pitfalls. I hope this brief video helps you understand just how much thought and planning goes into the creation of an editorial cartoon. Now, my processes are not the same as every other cartoonist, but we all have one common trait. we observe, and we think. Sketching is merely our language to communicate our thoughts.